My name is Megan, and I'm really excited to be here today, specifically to share some insights and hopefully some inspiration on how you can develop your career cycle. So a little bit about me. Professionally, I spend a lot of time thinking about this. How can we best identify and develop talent? Or better yet, how can we help others reach the goals that they hope to achieve? I've learned a lot over the last few years, whether it's working at different sized companies, with different types of teams, with various leadership styles. But there's one thing that's consistent I've noticed across all of them. It's that career advancement is challenging. Whether it's defining and implementing a career path, it's often an afterthought. And maybe that's because we don't know where we want to go. Maybe the right opportunity hasn't come along. Or, maybe just the company that we're working at doesn't have the structure in place to identify and develop its team. There was a job website called Indeed that did a study of 1,000 women in the tech field, asking them about their experience in trying to advance within their career. And what they found was that most women left their job because they felt there was a lack of growth in their career or general trajectory. So how can we as individuals take charge in identifying and developing our own career paths? Well, I'm going to talk a little bit today about a few steps and things that I've learned over the past few years. I think, being able to take a step back and identifying where you want to go is really the starting point, so that you have your starting line and can kind of put the right steps in place to get to where you want to go. So I actually developed a framework for this that I like to call the PPP, which I now realize is a very, very popular stimulus check. But I mean, hey, maybe that means it'll be way easier to remember. But the PPP framework essentially helps you draw your map and kind of the steps and pieces you need to think through where you want to go, and then best identify the steps that are needed to get there. So let's jump into it. The first P in the PPP framework is people. And so I like to start off with a people analysis for a few reasons. So maybe within the organization I'm at today, are there people that I admire or jobs that I think are really interesting? Maybe even, thinking about your team structure. Do you have the people around you who can support you in potentially getting to where, you might want to go? And maybe, this isn't even inside your organization. Maybe there's somebody outside of your organization who potentially you really admire and think could help share some insight, wisdom, and advice as well. Having these types of conversations with these various folks within your organization or outside of, it's really helpful, right? It helps you understand different opportunities that are out there, as well as, what are the steps that they took to get there. And, maybe actually people analysis is also very relevant in starting a brand new job or looking for a new job. I like to think of this because, people is obviously something you'll be working with. You'll be working with these people a lot, essentially, in any organization. So hopefully, you're able to find folks that you really enjoy working with. And so whenever kind of evaluating a new job or opportunity, what's the culture like? What kind of people are attracted there? Is this an environment in where you think you'll have an opportunity to grow and learn and do the things that you enjoy the most? And so by kind of thinking through all these different steps, you're able to see, okay, well, here's my starting line. Generally this is where I want to go, and maybe try to understand what are some of the pieces that are needed to get there, whether it is, training, whether it is kind of mentorship outside of your organization, or if it's in a new job, being able to ask the right kind of questions to understand the environment that you're getting into. The second P of the PPP is purpose. And, I like to think of purpose as a bunch of different things, because really today, we're in such a unique position where we really have the opportunity to pursue anything and everything, that we're curious or passionate or interested in. Especially in technology, there's so many new opportunities and advancements to really actually focus on what you love doing. And so when you think a little bit about, okay, well, Maybe purpose can be defined as a company mission. Is the company working towards something that you truly believe and care a lot about, and you want to be able to make an impact there? Or maybe it is a job feature, function, something specific that you want to learn or do or just become an expert in. Does this make you happy? Do you really enjoy working on this kind of piece or function? And then the last is, maybe it's something totally different. Maybe it's something you've always been curious about but haven't really had the chance to pursue. When you're able to kind of think about actually the things that you're interested in pursuing and want to do, there are probably opportunities out there. And when you actually pair people and purpose together, this is an amazing combination, because not only are you going to be working with people that you enjoy, admire for whatever reasons, as well as working on something that just gets you out of bed in the morning and you're super excited about. I think it's going to make, any sort of kind of career planning advancement a lot more fun. You're doing this in the right company and kind of the right things that get you excited. So the last P in the framework is potential. And I think that, when you look at different types of organizations and different teams, there's so much that you can control, but also being able to do a little bit of an analysis of, okay, well, what does the organization actually have to offer? What does that look like? And this is different depending on the size of the company. So, for example, tiny, small startups, these are great opportunities for people to learn, be kind of a jack of all trade. You're helping out with everything, just trying to help the company essentially grow those legs and get up out the door. And I think that, a lot of times the structure is not in place. They can be very chaotic, but maybe, you're able to find kind of the right people, the purpose you're working on, and an environment where you're constantly learning, growing, and iterating. And then maybe on medium-sized companies, this is typically when organizations start to actually put structure in place, whether it is hiring kind of more senior people to help kind of develop team, manage certain flows, and essentially get the company ready to scale to the next level. Your work is often a little bit more focused on one unique thing, a specific function within the business. And usually there's a lot of opportunity to grow because you'll have that talent development, you'll have those opportunities, and a little bit more of a vision of like, what are the next steps the company needs to succeed. And the last stage is large, big corporations. And, these are really great places for folks to become experts or specialists in something. And so focusing on a really, really niche kind of product, service, whatever it may be, a skill set, and really having the opportunity to work with world-class people to kind of pull in and bring those things to development. Often there's lots of kind of structure in place already. Talent, again, is kind of able to grow and they can identify and nurture those people up. But again, you understanding that your people, potential, and purpose all work closely together. And so when you're able to kind of evaluate different opportunities with this basic framework in mind, you're just going to be able to have a better clarity and confidence in yourself of saying, okay, well, this is where I want to go. This is kind of the things I think that I need to get there, as well as, am I in the right environment? Am I actually going to be able to achieve those goals moving forward? So those are the 3 pieces of the PPP, which is so many P's in one spot. But I think that this is going to give you, like I said, the confidence to go to the next stage, which is really having the talk. And what do I mean by having the talk? Well, a lot of times we can't do this on our own, right? Managers or hiring managers, they're not mind readers. They don't know what an individual wants or what they're looking for or things that are needed. And so after you've taken the time to reflect on the things that are kind of important for you and in the career path that you want to take, having this discussion with a manager not only opens up a 2-way conversation, it helps put that awareness as well as potentially next steps in place to actually figure out how do you get there. And keep in mind too, hiring managers or direct managers, they often have a different perspective and visibility on where the company is growing or what is happening, what new roles are coming out. And so by being kind of honest and transparent up front with kind of a clear goal in mind, this is going to help you fill in the gaps more fully as you have this discussion. So I like to think of it as, okay, well, you need to have a framework in mind to actually have this conversation in a way that's impactful. And what I've learned is that there's a few things to keep in mind. So for example, when you're actually going to talk to your manager, starting off really simply like, hey, this is where I want to go. That is clear, and you're able to kind of say like, look, here's where I am today. This is what I'm doing, and this is where I want to go, and I believe these are the steps that I need to get there. Next point is, what does it take to get there? And this is going to make it a dialogue between you and your manager to essentially help fill those things in place and make it measurable, right? Now all of a sudden, kind of this vague idea, you're going to be able to actually have actionable steps that are going to be needing to take place, or even just perspective. So for example, maybe, to become a manager, you need to be able to have some more skills in kind of leading teams. Well, okay, if you can't do that internally, where else can you do that? Can I, mentor or work with people outside of my organization? Can I get mentorship from somebody else to kind of help me build these skills and develop them? And when you have this type of perspective, you're able to essentially put steps in place. The next is, what does it take to get there? And then specifically, what milestones? And so after you've had the discussion, you're able to kind of see from both sides of the table what the full picture looks like and where you're at today and hopefully where you want to go. Now you can say, okay, well, if I achieve X, Y, and Z over the next, quarter, few months, whatever, can we continue this conversation? What does that look like? And will I be able to be considered for that role? And this way, not only are you grabbing and kind of taking the ball and putting it into your court, you're essentially lining yourself up to take control of that development cycle. And I think the last is the most important step, which is following up. It is so important for you to follow up. When is the next time we can chat on this? After these milestones are completed, when can we touch base? As I do this, how can I make sure that we're keeping this conversation going? Like I said at the beginning of the conversation, sometimes career advancement is an afterthought. Other priorities and things come up. And so when you take the ownership to essentially push that conversation forward with the steps that are needed to get there, it's going to help you take control of actually moving the needle ahead. So absolutely make sure that at the end of that conversation, you schedule a next touch point to when you can continue to check in on progress. Now, I know that virtually this can be a little bit challenging. Perception and how things are communicated, and even just being on Zoom all day, it's really hard to read a room, as well as it's exhausting, right? And so I think there's a few hacks or things that have helped me over the last few years, but I also recommend them, doing them in actual non-virtual times as well, because it just helps frame your train of thought and helps you kind of think about, okay, well, what's the next step and what do I need to do? So here's some hacks that I'd recommend. First is tracking your milestones. So whether it is a, Google Doc, a Trello board, a Notion board, whatever, all of the things that you kind of aligned on and said, okay, these are the things that we need to achieve over the next X amount of time, put them in place. And what you can do to essentially make those things work or be more valuable for you is, as these projects are shipped, as these milestones are reached, what are the outcomes? What are the results? Put those into that board as well. Hey, we launched this new feature on the website and it's driving an X% more click-through rate to buying the product. Or, we shipped this new product feature and millions of people are using it every day. Whatever those metrics are, put them in, because it shows that you are contributing to the value of the organization, and that when you again have these discussions, you're able to put a little bit of weight behind the work that you've been doing. And knowing your value is the second point. And the reason that I say this is that, any conversation is a negotiation. Whether it's product, prioritization, resources, negotiations, promotions, etc. It's always an active negotiation where you're trying to determine, okay, what is the perspective on the other side? How can we get there? Where's the common ground? But also, what's the value that I bring that kind of gives me the credibility and authority to push or ask for these things? And so when you track all your milestones and you're able to say, look, this is the value that I bring to an organization, it puts you in a much easier place to essentially have these discussions moving forward. And documenting your next steps. So at every single touch point you have with this manager, I always like to have, whether it's a Google Doc, so that it's transparent and both sides can see, and you're just actively typing in your objectives and notes, right? X person is doing this is the timeline, no. It's, a long thread of just kind of a dialogue that we've been having, but then both sides of the party can check in and it's transparent and clear. And again, it just helps you when you need to reference things or go back, because, having these conversations online, everything that goes on in our heads, I'd like to think we're all savants and can remember everything, but that's not necessarily the case. So always kind of documenting key takeaways, action items, etc. will just help you, I think, stay organized and on top of moving your career path forward. Structure your asks. And so sometimes when you have these conversations, you got kind of a whole bunch of different questions and kind of not necessarily a lot of focus. If there is one or two things, whether it's a blocker, something that you need help with, or a resource that you need, be very clear and explicit in those asks and try not to clutter it with everything else that potentially could be impacting, going wrong, personal feelings, and all that stuff. Those are all, I think, valuable things to be aware and to be able to express. But I think that in these types of conversations, having one or two clear asks will just help you, again, stay organized and keep the ball rolling. And the last is, practice makes perfect. And I say this because sometimes these conversations, actually most times, these conversations are hard. I'm not going to say that they're easy, right? It takes time and it takes practice. And so whether it's with a friend, a colleague, or a partner, being able to say, hey, this is what I want to do. Let me just run through it one time, just so that I can build that confidence and kind of focus in on what I need to say or achieve. It'll help give you a little bit more calmness and tranquility, so that when you actually go to ask it, it's not like the first time and you're a little bit nervous or overwhelmed. So I definitely recommend practicing no matter what. So that's it. That's how you build your first development cycle. And this is something that will continue to happen. All of us continue to grow and iterate and aspire for new things. And so if you take the chance to essentially stop, reflect, and think about the PPP framework and how it could help you in defining that path, this will be a skill that will help you move forward and advance in the career that you hope to. And so, here at Diagram, we have a lot of really great companies and organizations that have lots of growth opportunities. So if you're interested in any of them, don't hesitate to check out the site. I just want to say thank you all so much for having me today. It honestly was a real pleasure. Thank you.